Northeast Wisconsin farmers and dairy producers are watching closely as the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade agreement heads toward a major review this summer.
And today in Green Bay, business leaders and Congressman Tony Weed discussing the uncertainty surrounding that deal and how it could have major consequences for Wisconsin agriculture. Elise Noe joins us in studio after hearing the concerns raised by farmers.
Yeah, Chris and Cami, farmers, cheesemakers, and business leaders all say they want the USMCA trade deal to stay in place, but there needs to be better enforcement and more certainty moving forward. Now in Wisconsin, where agriculture, of course, drives a huge part of the economy, leaders say any new tariffs or trade problems with Canada and Mexico wouldn't just impact farmers. They could impact jobs, prices, and businesses across the state. At Belgioso Cheese in Green Bay Wednesday, farmers, business leaders, and Congressman Tony Weed discussed what they call a high-stakes moment for Wisconsin agriculture. The main issue, whether the U.S. can keep strong trade relations with Canada and Mexico without new tariffs or additional trade barriers.
Our goal is to export more and to make sure that, we have free and fair trade. But we don't live in that world, unfortunately.
Weed saying the goal is to keep the agreement in place while pushing Canada and Mexico to follow through on existing trade commitments. For Wisconsin dairy producers, the concern is economic.
If you don't have USMCA, even the smallest tariff would be hugely impactful.
Belgioso leaders say Canada and Mexico are some of their most important export markets, and even small cost increases could impact growth.
If we don't have this strategically, then our growth is inhibited. The 1,300 plus employees that we have obviously are going to get affected. But more importantly, especially the Wisconsin dairy farmers who supply us all of our milk, they would be grossly affected.
And farmers say those exports are now a major part of keeping Wisconsin agriculture running.
If you would put 6 gallons of milk on this table, 1 gallon of that milk is what we are trading, what we are exporting out.
For business leaders, this goes far beyond agriculture.
Then higher costs, and of course, higher costs always equal reduced competitiveness.
The Greater Green Bay Chamber says trade with Canada and Mexico supports more than 230,000 Wisconsin jobs and generates more than $11 billion in economic impact. Another issue brought up during the discussion, ethanol and corn exports, with farmers pushing for expanded E15 options as gas prices continue to rise. Cami?